Hello, and welcome to the 50th episode of Cora's Place. I'm so glad that you've chosen to join me for today's conversation. In today's episode, I'll be talking about journaling and some benefits that come with developing the habit of regular journaling. As always, if you like what you hear, please leave a review and or comments, follow my podcast, and tell your friends. Also, please follow the podcast page I've made on Facebook. If you'd like to contact me via email instead of a Facebook message, you can email me at corachin@mailbox.org. If you are new here, welcome! I'm your host, Cora, and I am so excited to have you on this journey with me. Before I get into today's topic, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who has followed my podcast journey from the very beginning. I am so thankful to have made this podcast, and I hope to continue it for a long time. It is one of my favorite hobbies, and I love it. I cannot believe that this is already my 50th regular episode. It does not seem like it should be possible. Having this podcast is such a wonderful thing, and I enjoy it. Now, let's dive into the topic for today. Today, I want to share my thoughts on journaling and some of the benefits of keeping a journal on a regular basis. Unfortunately, as of the recording of this episode, I haven't really been as good about keeping a journal as I used to be at one point when I was younger, but I don't want that to discourage you or make you think it's impossible to keep a journal. It definitely does take a lot of perseverance and persistence, but it can be possible when and if you try. I think that's the case with anything, though. You don't ever get better at anything if you don't try. I think there are a few different methods of journaling that you could try. While I will probably really only talk about the ones that I have tried in this episode, I would encourage you to find a method that works best for you. The methods I have used the most are probably writing out my prayers and also just journaling my thoughts, kind of like I'm talking to a friend. Maybe not exactly like that, but similar in idea. My favorite out of the two kind of switches back and forth depending on what I'm going through, but lately, as of the recording of this episode that is, I feel like I have been more likely to write out my prayers rather than journaling my thoughts on situations. I used to only write out my thoughts, but sometimes I also might do a mixture of both depending on the situation. I probably enjoy writing out prayers more than writing out my thoughts, but I'm not sure. With writing my thoughts like I'm talking to a friend, I usually will go through a brief overview of the situation I am facing at that time, list what emotions I am feeling as a result of that situation, and that kind of thing. Honestly, it is just pretty basic and not anything too crazy or elaborate. It's not that I don't want to go more in depth, I just have a hard time coming up with things to write sometimes, and it takes me a little while to figure out what I want to say. With writing my prayers, I usually try to go a little more in depth. I probably do it this way usually. I will ask God for something in the situation. An example could be wisdom, tell him what emotions I'm feeling, and explain what's going on. Then, I occasionally will also repeat some truths about God back to him. Maybe not all in that exact order, though. It kind of depends on what comes to mind to do first. Sometimes, I have trouble figuring out what to say when I pray, so having something written out or writing it while I pray is helpful. It might not always help, but it makes it a little bit easier to have it written out. Sometimes, I like to read through my prayers right after I have written one. It's also kind of cool to be able to look back on them, too. Sometimes I will type out prayers on my phone or my computer, but I also have a journal that I like to use to write my prayers in when I'm able to. I can usually type a little bit faster than I can handwrite things, but it's okay. I honestly actually kind of prefer typing over handwriting for a lot of things. I still do handwritten things in some situations, but if I had a choice between typing or handwriting, I would probably pick typing. Not necessarily because I don't care about handwriting, though. I just find typing to be faster and easier for different things that I do. Sometimes, handwriting can be fun, but it's not really my favorite personally. To be honest, though, I love writing as a hobby, even if I am just typing things rather than actually writing with a pen and paper. In my opinion, if you are just journaling your prayers, or even just journaling your thoughts on a situation, it really doesn't matter at all if you don't have perfect handwriting, the proper words, punctuation, spelling, or spacing of words. God doesn't care about that. He just wants to hear from you. He knows what's on your heart, even if you don't have perfect spelling or handwriting. I definitely don't have perfect handwriting, but that's okay. God wants you to come to Him regardless of that. He will listen and care no matter what. Also, it's not like anyone would see your journal, as long as you're careful and keep it somewhere private. Journaling isn't always easy, but it can be a really good and a very healthy discipline to develop in your life. It can be a really healthy way to process situations you are facing in your life. I think the hard parts for me of journaling are consistency in how often I journal, the clarity of my written words, and even figuring out what to write in some situations. Knowing what to write can be very tricky at times. I think that's kind of normal for people, though. Thankfully, it's not always the case, just sometimes. It's important to try to have a routine of keeping a journal. What I mean by that is being consistent if you can and are able. Some days it just doesn't always work out to write. If you miss a day or two, it's okay. Missing a day of journaling does not make you a failure at all, so please don't even believe that it does. You are human and can only do so much in a day. You might also just be too tired some days to write anything. That is also okay too. You can just get back into it when you are ready and aren't as tired. To be honest, I haven't really journaled as much lately as of the recording of this episode, so it is definitely okay to take a break when you need it. Journaling should not be something that you ever feel forced to do. I mean, yes, it is good for you to journal, but you should be able to choose for yourself whether or not you want to do it. I think that if it ever feels forced, you should take a break. Ask yourself why you're doing it. If your motive to do it is because you feel like you are letting others or yourself down when you don't do it, that's not a good thing. However, if your motive is to release emotions and unwind at the end of a difficult day, I think that is a good thing, and I'm proud of you for choosing to do that. There are healthy ways to release emotions, and there are also unhealthy ways. I feel like people most often choose unhealthy ways to release emotions. I know that I am even guilty of that at times. I think a lot of people do that, though. People might also choose other things as well that aren't necessarily all that great. One way that it could look like is watching TV and eating too much junk food. Of course, there are definitely other unhealthy ways to cope with stress in life, so that's not the only one, but I think that TV and too much junk food would be one of the top ones. I'm not really saying that you need to never eat junk food or watch TV again, though. I just think you need to do it in moderation and use self-control. Self-control can be hard to develop, though. It takes time and effort to develop that, so please be patient with yourself when it's not going the way you hoped it would. One other benefit of journaling, either prayers or just thoughts on a situation, is that later on, you can go back through and kind of see what has changed in your life since any particular entry. Sometimes you might notice that something you prayed for a year ago, or even a few weeks ago, have been answered. Maybe not in the way that you hoped it would, but that's not always a bad thing. You might also notice that a prayer is answered in the way you hoped. That can be amazing when it happens, and I think it can be a reason to celebrate and praise God. He can, will, and does do good things in our lives. We just have to look for that more intentionally. It's such an incredible thing when prayers are answered in the way we wanted, but at the same time, we also need to remember that God is the one who is ultimately in control of our lives, and He knows what's best for us, even when we can't see how it will work out in our life. These are all things I honestly need to remember to remind myself of in my own life when I'm facing challenges or hard times. Life is not easy, but when we have God on our side, that makes it better. God will never change or fail. He will always be near us when we need Him. It may not always feel like He is there, but all you have to do is call out to Him in your struggle, and He is close by, willing to help you. Please reach out to me if you have any questions regarding this, or if you just need some extra help or guidance. I would love to help if I can. I may not get it perfect all the time, but I want to help as many people as I possibly can with this podcast. I guess my why behind the podcast is to be an encouragement and a light to people. This world is filled with so much darkness, and I want to try to make this world just a little bit brighter by continuing to make this podcast for you. If there is someone struggling that came to mind while listening to this episode, or even any other episode, please share the podcast with them. I'm sure it would mean a lot if you showed that you cared about them by sharing this podcast with them. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please follow, leave a comment, and a review of my podcast if you haven't already, and please follow my podcast page on Facebook so you never miss an update. If you have any verses you'd like me to read on a future episode, or if you have any topics you'd like me to talk about, you can email me at corachin@mailbox.org, or you can send me a message on my podcast page on Facebook through the link in the show notes, and I will get back to you when I can. Hope you tune in next week for the 51st episode.